Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. It's JMA Friday, so we're going to have a look at weather for the coming month from the Japanese model. We're in a cold spell now, but will it go on beyond this first week of February? Will it last into the second week of February, or will it turn milder? Have a look at all the charts in a moment. If you want to go on with that, just say about the ads. There's links to articles on most pages at gasweathers.com. Have a browse through the widgets, any articles that you're interested in, please click through, and you'll be able to go and read those articles. At the same time, you have to support Gaz Weathers. Thanks so much for doing that. Just say about the webcast. I'm doing a live webcast for the first time ever at gasweathers.com. So it's going to be at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock Saturday. If you want to hear what myself and my good friend Quantum think about the current situation with the weather in terms of the models, what's happening, and maybe a few other bits and pieces as well, come back to Gaz Weathers at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening and listen to what we've got to say. It's going to be the first time ever that I'm live, so anything could happen. Hopefully I won't drop any clangers. I won't be able to stop it and go off and do it again. So anything could happen. Come back at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening to see what goes on with that. Right, we're going to start off with the Central England temperature for January from Hadley. This is provisional up to yesterday, the 29th. So it's bang up to date. CET currently standing at 4.8 degrees, an anomaly of 1 degree above average. As a provisional to the 29th of January, 29th of the month, which was yesterday. Now, that's a bit over the top. I think that will be corrected downwards once we get through to the end of the month, probably by around 0.3, 0.4 degrees. And then it's also going to drop a little bit as well anyway, because it's going to be quite cold today and tomorrow. So it's probably not going to be that far, really, from the average, maybe half a degree above average, something like that. But certainly not a great deviation, and much, much, much cooler than the very mild January that we had last year. Of course, last year we didn't have any cold weather at all through January. There was no frost, no snow. So we've paid the price a little bit. It's very wet, but we've paid the price this year. It hasn't been as wet or as mild, but it's been a bit colder and a bit frostier. And this takes us into the start of February. So these are the 500 millibar height anomalies from the Japanese model, broken down into weekly periods. The first week period takes us from the 29th of January through to the 5th of February. And blue, as you know, with 500 millibar heights, extrapolating to low pressure. Orange, red, yellow extrapolating to high pressure, blue is extrapolating to low pressure. So what we see through the coming weekly periods, we've got a trough of low pressure to the east of the southeast of the country, ridges through the Atlantic, and another trough across the east of the state. Going to be very cold there. The flow is going something like that around the troughs and the ridges, and that pulls in this cold northeasterly, northeasterly flow across the country. So it's going to be a cold week through the coming week. That's a pretty good representation of what we've got on offer. It's going to be pretty wintry. Now, as we go through to the second weekly period, this takes us from the 5th to the 12th of February, we find that everything starts to revert westerly. So we're going back to a more typical pattern. We've got the low pressure there around Iceland and Greenland. We've got high pressure down to the south, above average heights, going through Spain and Portugal. The jet streams running through like that. So it's a much milder weekly period through that second week of February, and the westerlies are coming back basically. Now it could be mostly dry, close to that high pressure down in the south, but it's more unsettled up in the north and the northwest. But the main thing is that the cold weather breaks down and it reverts back to a milder westerly flow. And then as we go through to the 3rd and 4th weeks, and this, can you believe, takes us from the 12th to the 26th of February, so virtually to the end of the winter. Hard to believe that we're already talking about the end of the winter, but a bit different with this. So this is different compared to anything we've had this winter, really, in that we've got high pressure building over the country. You've got this area of above average heights with these yellow colours sitting right over the top of the UK. The low pressure, the trough, is in the central part of the Atlantic. The jet stream is doing something like that. So, as I say, that is different, and it's high pressure sort of in over the country. Now, it's a little bit difficult to work out whether that's mild or cold, really. It could be a bit of both. The second half of February, the sun is rapidly getting stronger. It's heading up in towards the northern hemisphere again, of course, by the time we get through to late February. So, by day, it could be reasonably mild, actually. I wouldn't necessarily say spring-like, but it could certainly be pretty mild under that area of high pressure by day, but by night it could still be cold with hard overnight frost, maybe some freezing fog as well. Of course, if the freezing fog lingers into the day, then the daytimes will be cold as well. But it is dry with that solution. High pressure is in there nicely over the country. So, yeah, maybe a fine end to February, and perhaps a little bit mild by day, a little bit spring-like, but by night it could be relatively cold. Just depends whether the flow is sort of coming up from a southerly direction or southwesterly direction, or whether the mean flow is easterly. If it's easterly, it's going to be quite cold and about high pressure. If it's sort of southerly, southwesterly, it's going to be relatively mild. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Notice all this yellow over the top of the pole, by the way. Quite a lot of northern blocking there, so quite what's going on with that. There is a question mark, I would suggest, with that. We could ridge these high pressures together in the end and maybe form quite an intense blocking area of high pressure up over the pole. That would be a danger with that much yellow over the North Pole. Now, have a look at the CFS for the coming month. Again, these are 500 millibar heights broken down into week period. The first week period takes us from the 30th to the 30th of January to the 5th of February. And again, very much like the JMA, it's the same solution. We've got the ridging here through the central Atlantic. We've got the trough around the UK and many central parts of Europe as well. Another cold trough over the east of the United States. So the jet stream is going something like that around those troughs and ridges, and we're pulling down cold northerly, northeasterly winds into that trough. So it's a good representation, same as the JMA, of what we've got on offer through the coming week. It's going to be a cold week, it's going to be a wintry week, and yeah, the east probably eventually ends up with the greatest risk of snow showers as this trough sort of sinks away into Central Europe and the flow turns more into the east or northeast. Now, the second week is very interesting. This goes from the 6th to the 12th of February, and at this point, the JMA is reverting us into a westerly flow. Not so with the CFS from America. What the CFS wants to do is set up high pressure over Scandinavia, a big blocking area of high pressure in there over top of Scandinavia, with the trough of low pressure being blocked to the south of Greenland. So the flow is going like that between the trough around Greenland and the high pressure over Scandinavia, which means, that's the jet stream I should say, which means the flow is actually coming easterly with this. We're bringing in easterly winds as that area of high pressure over Scandinavia drags the flow around to continental Europe, and it would stay cold through that second week. So there's a discrepancy there, a disagreement between the JMA and the CFS. The JMA wants to break us out of the cold pattern and revert us back to westerlies. The CFS wants to keep the cold pattern going and bring those easterly winds in through the second week of February. We move through to the third week period. This takes us from the 13th to the 19th of February. And this is a battleground UK type scenario. We've still got the high pressure in there over Scandinavia, a strong area of high pressure, but the trough in the Atlantic is moving in. So that's a real battle. We're trying to see westerly winds coming in from the Atlantic. The high pressure over Scandinavia is still trying to bring in these easterly winds, and that means one thing really, it's snow. That would be a snowy type scenario through the middle part of February as the Atlantic and the continental air sort of battle it out. But generally I would say that is still staying cold. So this is a cold month actually being predicted on this morning's update from the CFS model. This is a cold February. It's not until we get through to the final weekly period, going from the 20th to the 26th of February, that high pressure finally breaks down enough over Scandinavia, begins to get forced back towards western Russia, and that we allow this trough of low pressure in the Atlantic to move in. So eventually we do go back into westerly flow there. Westerlies begin to come back. Takes a long while. It doesn't happen until the final week to 10 days of February, but eventually the Atlantic does break in. The position of that trough, by the way, means that even though the Atlantic's coming through, it's still relatively chilly. The flow is still generally coming from a northwesterly type direction, with air originating from Greenland and Newfoundland. So even then, it's not desperately mild by any means on that sort of setup. So quite a disagreement there between the JMA, which wants to break this cold weather down that we're currently in, wants to break it down quite quickly after the first week and revert us into a westerly and then build in some sort of high pressure that could be relatively mild at least by day. Whereas the CFS wants to keep the cold weather going certainly to the middle of the month, maybe a little bit beyond the middle of the month, via a Scandinavian high that introduces easterly winds. It'll be very interesting to see which one of those models wins that battle. So have a look at the nearer time frame. This is the GFS ensemble, temperature ensemble. It's cold, of course, now. The red line here, the thick red line, is the 30-year temperature average. We're below average, we're colder than average. I'm going to be staying below average for the coming week at least. So it's not until we get to around the 8th or 9th of February, which is sort of this zone here, that we begin to see the temperature ensemble starting to pick up again. But even then, there's a lot of scatter. So this is sort of the second week of February just here. This is where we've got the disagreement between the JMA and the CFS, of course. A lot of scatter there. So there's enough evidence there to at least suggest the CFS could be right. I think the general trend of the ensemble probably goes with the JMA, turns it milder through the second week of February, reintroduces those westerly winds. But there's enough there, there's enough cold members of the ensemble in this section to suggest that the CFS could be right, that the cold weather extends out into the second week of the month. But before we get to that, of course, obviously we're going to have quite a cold week coming up through the coming week. Very good agreement on that one. Have a look at the temperature anomaly for the coming week. This takes from the 30th of January to the 7th of February. It's going to be colder than average, as is most of Central and Western Europe. The anomalies there are coming out around 2 to 4 degrees below average, so a significantly cold start to February seems to be on the cards. Have a look at the generic charts. Finally, here's the GFS for Monday. This area of low pressure looks like it's going to miss us. This is going down into the Bay of Biscay, and there's no real support for it to be coming in. There could be a last minute change of direction that pushes it into the UK, but I think overall that one's going to miss us. We're going to be in a northerly flow to start next week, and we've got to be watching out for a disturbance to come down from the north. There's some sort of trough in this sort of zone here, some sort of polar low perhaps, or little area of low pressure that is looking like it's going to move southwards. Now, at the moment, most of the models want to trend that down the western side of the country. So as we go through into Tuesday, for example, with the GFS, the low pressure is running down the western side, taking a risk of significant snow to western parts of the country, with central east areas staying very cold, but mostly dry. Now, that could change the track of that little disturbance. It may not even develop. It's probably hasn't developed yet. It may not even develop. So let's wait and see a bit longer what happens with that. But there is a risk around Monday, Tuesday that some sort of disturbance could come down from the north and give some places a bit of a snow event. But we're going to have to firm up on that one. Let's go through to the middle of next week. All those disturbances are gone. The high pressure's out in the Atlantic, and we're sort of pulling the winds into more of a northeasterly flow then. So if anything, the snow shower risk will probably revert more to the eastern and southeastern side of the country through Wednesday into Thursday. We're actually in a proper easterly flow there across England and Wales. At least we're bringing in those easterly winds. So that does suggest that the snow showers will be more in the east and the southeast through the middle part of next week, with the high pressure sitting out to northwest, staying cold up to the middle of next week as well. Some hard overnight frost. Now, the high pressure is ridging there over Scandinavia, so it is seeing that, what the CFS is trying to do with building that high pressure up over Scandinavia. But notice all of this purple around Greenland. That's the polar vortex coming back, and that is pushing into the high pressure it's trying to build over Scandinavia. So what happens eventually on this particular one of the GFS anyway, is that the high pressure just begins to slip southwards. We start to push the winds back in from the Atlantic. It's a gradual process, a slow process, but by day 10, Monday the 9th of February, look at that, we are reverting back to a westerly flow. That's what the JMA is seeing. But as we go through to the second week of February, the cold weather breaks down. We will begin to revert back to a more typical westerly type pattern, albeit with high pressure still relatively close by to the south and the southwest. Now, at this point, the CFS, if you remember, wants to have that high pressure up over Scandinavia and be bringing the winds into the east. But the GFS is saying no to that idea. The ECMWF for early next week again, we've got that northerly wind coming down. There's some sort of disturbance there on this kink in the ice bars around this sort of zone here. So again, we've got to watch out with what's happening with that disturbance Monday into Tuesday. That will be bringing a risk of snow to some parts of the country. A general consensus today is for that to be in the west, but it's too far away to be certain. Going through to middle next week, the high pressure is out to the west. We've got the low pressure over Central Europe, bring down this northerly and eventually turn a little bit more northeasterly flow as we move through into Thursday. So yeah, the snow shower risk should be more to the east and the southeast by the time we get through to Thursday, and it's staying cold at least up to the end of next week as well. As we go into next weekend, very similar to the GFS, the high pressure begins to topple down over the country. Notice the polar vortex reforming back over Greenland. The westerly is trying to get back in, and by day 10, look at that, Monday the 9th of February, we're back into westerly flow then. We've broken down the cold weather and the winds, as I say, coming from quite a mild direction in the Atlantic, actually. If you follow the ice path back, the areas originating from the Azores, that's quite a mild push moving in around the top of that area of high pressure that's sitting there to the southwest of the country. So the general model agreement, the shorter range models seem to be in agreement that we're going to have a week of cold weather, staying cold throughout most of next week. Over next weekend and into the second week of February, it starts to turn moderate. We break down the cold weather and we reintroduce that southwesterly flow. Now, there is a high pressure trying to build over Scandinavia later next week, so don't rule out the chance that this high pressure could be more stubborn than these models think it's going to be. The CFS, whilst it's not well supported by any of these other models we've been looking at, it appears to be quite isolated. It could still be onto something with this. Very often the models can be too progressive in ending cold weather and reverting to a westerly flow. They can do it too quickly. That high pressure, if it gets in over Scandinavia, could be quite stubborn. So we're just going to have to wait and see, really. It's certainly going to have a week of cold weather. There will be some more wintry conditions coming up at times next week. We'll discuss it all in the weekend forecast tomorrow, so come back for that. Beyond the first week of February, we've got the chance that the cold weather could continue, but the general consensus this morning is probably to turn winds back to the west and turn it milder in the second week of the month, but a long way off, and many more twists and turns probably to come before we get to that. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.